Okay then guys, in this video I want to explain literally just what a function is, just like the absolute basics. So what is a function? A function basically means for every x value, there's only one y value. And basically anything that doesn't fit this description, that doesn't match with this, is called a relation. So I even wrote a kind of like a definition over here, but just remember this one, and literally anything that doesn't match this definition, that is a relation, okay? So you can just briefly read over this. A relation, it's basically any relationship between two variables, between an x and a y variable. And we'll actually get into what a function is, or like what does a function look like essentially. And then we can kind of compare it to a relation. So yeah, so there's a few different ways of representing functions, at least according to grade 11 math. The one more that I didn't include here is actually graphing. Or that could be associated with the vertical line test. So, but yeah, generally I'll just go over these. So anyway, ordered pairs. I think this is the best way for you to kind of see what a function is compared to a relation. So let me actually write down sort of like some examples. So for example, if you had something like, let me just make something up. Okay. So this would be a function because see, for every x value, 3, 4, and 5, there's only one y value. And I know that sounds super vague when I say it, so I always like to just like go straight to an example where this is not the case, so then you can actually see the difference. So let's say that we have pretty much the same set of coordinates, except we only have one thing that changed, one coordinate that changed. So here, now we have the same x value having two different y values. For the x value of 3, we have a y value of 5 and a y value of 6. So this means that it is not a function. So this is not a function. Okay, cool. And this one will be called a function. And what did I tell you about something not fitting this definition of being a function? It is a relation. So this is a relation. So that's how it essentially looks. If you just keep this in mind, you'll be good. And one thing just not get confused on is basically if you have sort of the vice versa of this definition going on in the ordered pairs. So for example, if you had something like this, so yeah, let's do that. Oops. So here in this case, you might look at these two coordinates and you might think, oh, like kind of like a red flag. You have two things that are the same. But these are the y values that are the same. The x values are different, right? We have 3 and 4. So this is still a function. And I think it really helps to think about what these ordered pairs actually look like on a graph. But I think we'll get into that later. So yeah. Okay, now let's talk about mapping. So these mapping diagrams, I'm not gonna lie to you, these only really pop up in grade 11 math, or at least according to the curriculum that I learned in high school. But these, and according to the students that I've taught in grade 11, this only really pops up in grade 11 functions, like in grade 11 math, and it doesn't really appear anywhere else further on in high school math. So don't worry about this too much. But obviously, this is still relevant in the units, so that's why I actually have to go over it. This always shows up on tests. So for this one, I really don't like the way that's formatted because it is quite hard to read. So what I suggest to my students is literally just uh, write this as coordinates. So write this as coordinates. So see over here, you just look where the arrow is. So first one, whoops, I already messed it up. So here you go, like um, 2, 3, 3, and then 4, 4, right? Yeah. So basically for this one, you can, as I was saying, like just write out these ordered pairs and then determine from there whether or not it's a function or not. So over here, this one's clearly a function. over here you can write down the coordinates. So I can already tell over here we have a coordinate that is 2, comma 3, and we also have a coordinate that is 2, comma 4. So this one over here is not a function. So I'll put not a function, or like in brackets relation, right? So yeah, and this one is a function. Yeah. So that's basically these mapping diagrams. And also another thing that you can do to kind of tell whether or not something is a function, you can kind of look at the equation. So here's some examples, and I just want to show the difference between functions that, like the difference in equations and functions versus relations. So here's some ones that are functions. So you're probably familiar with this. Like this is just kind of like a linear function, which you kind of like learn in the beginning of high school. Here's quadratic, so you're familiar with that as well. But the one thing I just like to compare it to is uh, sort of like equations that look like they are functions, but they're actually not. And I'll explain why. So for example, you might have seen something like this. So I believe that this is actually a circle, and the key red flag here is that y has an exponent, right? Because if x has an exponent, obviously it's a quadratic, but if y has an exponent, then it's a little bit fishy, right? So so basically equations like this are not functions, so these are relations, right? So yeah. All right. So and oh, this is also the case for if you had like sort of like something like this, for example. Uh, yeah, let's say something like that. Okay, now let's get into the vertical line test. So the vertical line test might be hard to explain if I'm not there with you in person, like in front of a piece of paper and like actually explaining it. But I'll try to explain the best I can. And I know that with some of my students, like it, it ends up not working, but I'm gonna do my absolute best here. So imagine that you had a graph. Let's say that you had a quadratic, okay? So you had a quadratic like this. The idea behind the vertical line test is it's a test to see whether or not something is a function. If it passes the vertical line test, then it is a function. If it does not pass the vertical line test, then it is a relation, okay? So what is a vertical line test? Imagine that you have like a ruler or you have like a pen like this, right? The one I'm using for my whiteboard here. So imagine you had this pen, right? And you put it on the function. Like imagine that my pen is like over here. So let me put this in a different color. So imagine that I took this whiteboard pen and then I put it like over here, right? Okay. So here, see, there's only one point. There's only one part in which the function touches my like the pen, essentially, right? I don't know why it's green. This is black, but whatever. So yeah, there's only one point in which it touches it, right? So the idea behind the vertical line test is that you just want to keep doing that, bring that whole pen across the function, okay, until you reach the end of the function. So you keep essentially keep doing that. So yeah, you bring the pen over here, you bring the pen like over here, you bring the pen over here. This is solely like this shape is not even a pen anymore, but yeah. So yeah, and see it only crosses over the function here, 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 here. Wherever it crosses, or basically it would only cross over the function at one point, okay? That's the key word. So what if this is not the case? So let me give you like let's say like the inverse of a quadratic or something. So let's say that we had another graph. This is not a function, by the way. I'll just let you know beforehand. But uh, we're gonna do the vertical line test anyway. So no matter where I bring the pen, this whiteboard pen, on the function, or even if there's just one, like, see over here, if I hypothetically, like, if I had the pen over here, like, I suppose that there would only be like one point in which it crosses over. But here, but pretty much everywhere else where you bring the pen across, the function crosses over here and here, 2 points. here and here, 2 points. So 2 points, right? And this means that it does not pass the vertical line test. So I'll kind of write it out. Does not pass vertical line test, right? Okay. So this would be classified as not a function, but this one would be classified as a function. This one passes the vertical line test, the one on the left, and this one does not pass the vertical line test. So that's kind of like the basics of functions and like how to identify them. I'm sure that there's probably more things I could go over, but I want to keep this nice and short, and I hope that you enjoyed this lesson.